Kevin, let's go through a little bit of the moves that we had. We don't have to harp on them too much. Obviously they brought back Trubisky. We did that live on the show last week. They made a bunch of moves. That was also live on the show last week, but things have since we've been on air. Obviously the Bills have, acquired, Morrow, a nice looking linebacker, a guy that actually was pretty effective at a 3-sack game last year. Going to take over for Terrell Dodson, a nice little addition, who's not going to cost too much money. As well as if you look at a nice addition in Mack Hollins. How do you feel about those two additions? Those are the two exterior additions right now.
Yeah, I really like the Nicholas Morrow addition because, like you said, that's probably the Terrell Dodson replacement as that linebacker 3. And really, I mean, I think the room is set. You have Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano hopefully healthy by week 1. And then you have Nicholas Morrow as that backup who can serve as that Dodson role because he has that flexibility where he can play middle linebacker, he can play weak side linebacker, and he's a veteran. And to your point, 95 tackles, 3 sacks last year for Philly, wore the green dot. And then the year before, he set a career high with 116 tackles with Chicago. And then I really like the idea of having Dorian Williams as that linebacker 4 because he also has that flexibility. We heard how the Bills are trying to get him to eventually become a middle linebacker. And I think that was before they realized how good Terrell Bernard was. But if you have those two as your backups with still Balin Spector sitting there as linebacker 5, I mean, maybe you re-sign Matakevich for special teams, but outside of that, that room is set right there.
Yeah, I mean, checking off the linebacker room, I thought was pretty decent to begin with, but being able to check off that box going into the draft is huge. We want to make sure that linebacker room is checked off. And the Bills are trying to do the same thing, admittedly on the defensive line, obviously bringing back AJ Epinesa, another move that has happened since the show was one that I was expecting to happen. I thought that everything made sense from his connections to loving Buffalo, to being here full time, to his value and his age. I thought that made sense. And then bringing back Daquan Jones on a pretty decent deal. Both of them are really nice looking deals. So the Bills have shored up their defensive line a little bit, but adding someone like Armstead right off the bat gives you another ability to go into the draft, not really needing to be desperate at the defensive tackle position, and one where Bean likes to be in those kind of positions. But another room we need to talk about real briefly here, Kevin, is we saw Jordan Poyer go to the Dolphins. And sounding off on Twitter and the grass field and his wife being so happy, blah, blah, blah. We saw that happen. And then bringing back Rapp and Cam Lewis. So, you really have a safety blanket there. But what should the Bills do at safety? Should we still be entertaining Cam Curl, some of the other bigger name free agents that are still available? Or you kind of packet it in for the draft? What's your take on the safety position right now?
You know what? Before we get into the safety position, I want to touch on Mack Hollins, one of the guys that we did sign, because sure. I think if we talk about wide receiver, that'll kind of transition us into safety, because I really don't know what to do financially, because I would love Cameron Curl. I would love Justin Simmons, but I think we need to talk this out. So in terms of Mack Hollins, we woke up to that news today and I was like, oh, Mack Hollins. That was my first reaction because we heard rumblings overnight that something could be going down. And then I was like, Mack Hollins. But I was like, all right, wait a sec, cool your guts, because Mack Hollins is a very solid wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6, who I think provides that valuable depth and competition with Justin Shorter on the back end. And I tweeted this earlier, so let me just pull it up because it'll probably be easier if we're looking at the same thing here. But I think basically the Bills need to work on the top half right now. The bottom half of their receivers, as I just found it right here. So Stephon Diggs is wide receiver 1. Shakir is wide receiver 3. And now either Mack Hollins or Justin Shorter will be fighting for wide receiver 5 and 6. And then, like I said in the tweet, the Bills also still have Andy Isabella and KJ Hamler. So really, we're looking at a wide receiver 2 and a wide receiver 4. And I would be shocked if the Bills don't use one of their 11 draft picks on a wide receiver, if not 2 or 3. So, Kevin, do you think that we could still potentially sign a free agent wide receiver, or are we done? Like, are we going into the draft trying to find 2 positions here? Because I think what we decide to do here at wide receiver determines what we do with the safety position, and maybe even Eric Armstead for that matter.
I think you're right by slashing 5 and 6 there of those individuals. I don't think they keep 6. They really haven't. They may flirt with it throughout the year, throughout the roster numbers. I think they'll need to pluck from other positions. I think they'll just keep 5. I don't know that there's 100% of reason to have Shorter. Maybe you stash him again. You can get interesting with the roster. But I don't think that there's a reason that they go both of them. So I do believe the battle at 5 is correct. I just don't think there's a 6 wide receiver spot to be had this season. So we'll see if they do determine that. I mean, they've been pretty consistent. Every year we think they're going to keep 6. They keep 5, and then a guy that's hurt, and then they put that player on the IR. So, and then only have 5. So that's kind of where I'm at this year with it. They'll probably have a draft choice. It's late in the draft with all these picks that they may stash this year. But I really think it's a Hollins versus Shorter kind of battle for that 5. And if they're both really good, well, then obviously you're going to keep a roster spot for them. You're going to figure it out. But I think for the most part, 5 and 6 is going to be just spot 5, and it's probably going to go to the winner of that because Hollins' deal, I don't anticipate, it says up to $3 million. I don't anticipate that being any much more than 1.5 to 1.8. So we'll see how that turns out when the numbers are released, but it does do a lot of things well. Last year, there were some fans of him, getting his 700 or 800 yards in Vegas at the time. He looks a lot like Gabe Davis, plays a lot like Gabe Davis, has a pretty good RAS, was pretty athletic coming out of college. Big height and frame, can block, can play all 4 phases of special teams. Shorter's got to prove he can do that to supplant him as well. So it's going to be a nice looking battle from a pretty much a rookie battling against a vet in Mack Hollins. So that'll be a fun one to watch as we get into training camp. But I don't think both will be. I don't think they go to receiver 6 unless they do crazy things in the draft with a couple of rookies that they want to stash. But yeah, I agree for the most part.
I think they'll keep 6 because, don't forget a couple years ago, they kept 7. So I feel like it was an anomaly this past year when they only had 5. And that was because of the numbers and all the tight ends that they were rocking with. But I think that they're going to keep 6 because I think Mack Hollins is a Gabe Davis and Trent Sherfield replacement. As you mentioned, he's a good blocker and he can play special teams. So that essentially locks him onto the roster for me. I don't think that they're going to get rid of Justin Shorter. We don't even know what he can do. And I think he has tremendous upside. So I think those positions are essentially locked. Now it's just a matter of who's going to be wide receiver 5, who's going to be wide receiver 6. And again, I think that the Bills need to find a wide receiver 2 and a wide receiver 4 now. So do you think that we could still sign one? Because I'm going to throw this name out there right now. I've been a huge proponent of KJ Osborne. I know we've talked in the past about Marquise Hollywood-Brown, but I think market's going to be too high, especially after Calvin Ridley's big deal today. Noah Brown went back to Houston on a relatively cheap deal. So KJ Osborne is someone who I've been wanting the Bills to target as he improved every single year in Minnesota. He provided some valuable depth, especially when Justin Jefferson went out. He came in. He has a little bit of flexibility inside, outside. And I think he would be the perfect wide receiver 4, allowing the Bills to still go draft that wide receiver 2. And he'd be within their price range. But again, like we've been saying at the outset of this, where do the Bills sit financially right now? Do you have enough money to go get a KJ Osborne, especially looking at that safety position that you already mentioned and a potential Eric Armstead signing? I know you like KJ Osborne too, and former UB product here. Would you still go get Osborne, or are you saving that money for safety and potentially Eric Armstead?
Man, you always suck me into the wide receiver talk. Just when I thought we were going to have a nice safety discussion, we are still railing off receiver. I think it's necessary that Bills do 2 receivers in the draft. I don't even want to hear any questionable a 2nd and a 7th. Like I want 2 real receivers out of this draft class. Most notably a 1 and a 4. That would be a lot along the lines where I'm thinking. So Brandon Beane, one of his famous lines and what he likes to tell us all the time, why this is relevant, is because he'll say things, I don't like to draft over free agents. So he is in the camp of saying, sure, if an opportunity presents itself for the best available player, obviously there's going to be some correlation there between maybe a guy they sign in free agency. But from the most part, you don't want to sign a guy, even of Osborne's level. I don't necessarily mean he's going to get Calvin Ridley money. Apparently, the Titans wanted to pay Calvin Ridley A.J. Brown money. What a goofy franchise. I'm not sure what they're doing over there. Like, why you wouldn't have just kept A.J. Brown. The rookie receiver that they got out of the A.J. Brown pick, I just not a Burks fan at all. I just don't know what the decisions were going on in Tennessee. But anyways, you try to prevent a situation to where you're going to sign a guy like Osborne at $6 to $8 million, and now you want 2 rookies, and now you're in a situation where does Osborne? Okay, you get 2 rookies. Does Osborne even play? It's not a famous thing that Brandon Beane, our general manager, likes to do, as he admits it. So I am a fan of Osborne. That would put us in a camp with Osborne, Hollins, and Shorter. Now, for the reasons you stated, now you're in a situation to where you may only have a receiver spot at that point. So especially if you're hoping to see some stuff out of Hamler, Brandon Beane doesn't enjoy that. So my opinion is I want the 2 rookie receivers. I want them to be a precedent. I like all these teams filling these receiver spots. We know Marvin Harrison's probably now going to go to New England for sure. Probably. I'm not sure if they're going to do a quarterback position. That's going to be an interesting battle. But I just don't see it in terms of wanting to take Osborne on right now, knowing that I really want 2 rookies. But if Osborne signs and the number goes down and down and down for some reason, like he's not going to get to 5 to 7 to 8 that he was possibly projected, that becomes a lot more interesting to me. And it's the whole slot debate, right? Like Tyler Boyd debate. If people are like, well, he's still on the market. But what are you going to do with, you have Khalil Shakir. But I've always said, get the best players you can for Josh Allen and worry about where they're going to place on the field next. So Osborne could fall in the camp of somebody worth acquiring. And it is a guy I still like him and Boyd. Obviously, Hollywood Brown's still there. I don't like a lot still left on the list. If we want to bring up the list now, would be a good time to kind of take a look at the list. Mike Clay just released his list, and there might be a name or 2 off this already, but it's from a couple hours ago. As you look at the start of free agency here, Calvin Ridley obviously came off, but Mike Williams is there. Marquise Brown. Are you going to go with someone like Michael Thomas, Tyler Boyd, Curtis Samuel? OBJ's had some ties to Buffalo, DJ Chark and KJ Osborne. You got Hunter Renfrow there too. Donovan Peoples-Jones I've seen come up a couple times. But about Donovan Peoples-Jones, Kevin, I don't really want to go under that, especially now that we have Mack Hollins. But how do you feel on that? Do you feel like you'd want to go and get like a Van Jefferson or a Josh Reynolds? Or are we just being redundant there as you look at the free agency list?
Yeah, that'd be too redundant to Mack Hollins. So it would have to be someone of Osborne's stature, if not higher.
Yes.
And just based on the money, I'm not sure if that's as feasible as I thought yesterday. So for the sake of this conversation and for how we open up the show, let's say that they decide to use their 11 draft picks on finding 2 wide receivers, and they try to pool that extra money towards Eric Armstead and the safety position that you already mentioned. So while we have this up, who do you like for safety?
I'm a big Julian Blackmon fan. I think he's a pure free safety. He's been really good. He gets his hand on balls. Obviously, he's going to cost the most of the remaining names. He's a guy that I really like at this stage as I got to sit back and kind of watch free agency play out. Obviously, Cam Curl is a difference maker. He can play in the box. He can play in free safety. If the Bills are able to get either of those 2 individuals for any type of money that's reasonable, I think you swing the trigger. Those are franchise style safeties. They're not top 5 safeties in the league, but they're close. So that's why I really like Blackmon and Curl. If you have to go a tick down, obviously Justin Simmons is right there as well. If you're looking at another type of free safety, he could make a lot of sense. And then, you got Jordan Fuller, like pretty much on signings and visits. Rayshon Jenkins signed. So you're starting to get thinner a little bit quicker. But Eddie Jackson jumps out to me too as a guy that I've liked his play. He was a ball hawk early on in his career. He's a guy I'd like to see hook up with Sean McDermott. How about who jumps out to you on the safety list?
No one really jumps out, to be honest. Jordan Whitehead was interesting, but he went back to Tampa Bay. Quandre Diggs, I thought about him, but isn't he a liability in pass coverage? And he's 31 years old. So if you're going to do that, You might as well have just kept Jordan Poyer for that rate. Someone who could be a sneaky addition. Someone mentioned this in the comments, Mike Edwards. Because I think if you pair him with Taylor Rapp and the supposed rookie, I think that could be a solid trio. And let me find that comment. It was from Greg here. He said, Mike Edwards can bring in some KC intel and how they play us. It's added value. And I think that's a good point, because if we're trying to get over the hump and beat Kansas City, well, maybe we should start plucking some of their players and say, hey, how do you defend them? What should we do? And I think that he could be that veteran voice to kind of lead a younger group with the potential rookie and Taylor Rapp, because I still think that Taylor Rapp got paid like a third safety. He's like a fringe starter right now, where he got paid, and you're looking at that contract and you say, okay, he can start some games when needed, or he can be a backup. So he's like a safety 2, safety 3. I think they're definitely going to do something. And I just think, looking at the roster, I would be shocked if they don't sign one and then draft one.